Welcome to the Sense Making in a Changing World podcast, where we explore the kind of thinking we need to navigate a positive way forward. I'm your host, Morag, permaculture educator and global ambassador, filmmaker, eco-villager, food forester, mother, practivist, and all-round lover of thinking, communicating, and acting regeneratively. For a long time, it's been clear to me that to shift trajectory to a thriving one planet way of life, we first need to shift our thinking. The way we perceive ourselves in relation to nature, self, and community is the core. So this is true now more than ever, and even the way change is changing. Unprecedented changes are happening all around us at a rapid pace. So how do we make sense of this? To know which way to turn, to know what action to focus on, so our efforts are worthwhile and nourishing and are working towards resilience, regeneration, and reconnection. What better way to make sense than to join together with others in open, generative conversation? In this podcast, I'll share conversations with my friends and colleagues, people who inspire and challenge me in their ways of thinking, connecting, and acting. These wonderful people are thinkers, doers, activists, scholars, writers, leaders, farmers, educators, people whose work informs permaculture and spark the imagination of what a post-COVID, climate-resilient, socially just future could look like. Their ideas and projects help us to make sense in this changing world, to compost and digest the ideas, and to nurture the fertile ground for new ideas, connections, and actions. Together we'll open up conversations in the world of permaculture design, regenerative thinking, community action, earth repair, eco-literacy, and much more. I can't wait to share these conversations with you. Over the last 3 decades of personally making sense of the multiple crises we face, I always return to the practical and positive world of permaculture, with its ethics of earth care, people care, and fair share. I've seen firsthand how adaptable and responsive it can be in all contexts, from urban to rural, from refugee camps to suburbs. It helps people make sense of what's happening around them and to learn accessible design tools to shape their habitat positively and to contribute to cultural and ecological regeneration. This is why I've created the Permaculture Educators Program, to help thousands of people to become permaculture teachers everywhere through an interactive online dual certificate of permaculture design and teaching. We sponsor global perma-youth programs, women's self-help groups in the Global South, and teens in refugee camps. So anyway, this podcast is sponsored by the Permaculture Education Institute and our Permaculture Educators Program. If you'd like to find more about permaculture, I've created a 4-part permaculture video series to explain what permaculture is and also how you can make it your livelihood as well as your way of life. We'd love to invite you to join our wonderfully inspiring, friendly and supportive global learning community. So I welcome you to share each of these conversations, and I'd also like to suggest you create a local conversation circle to explore the ideas shared in each show and discuss together how this makes sense in your local community and environment. I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which I meet and speak with you today, the Gubbi Gubbi people, and pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging. You're in for a treat today. My guest is Brett Cooper from Limestone Permaculture, a 1-acre permaculture farm near Newcastle in Australia. This is a story of how he and his family moved from the city and full-time work and a business into living full-time on their small farm. It's a journey of determination as well as clarity of purpose and vision. There's just so many different aspects to this story that Brett shares, which I know you're just going to love. It was such a wonderful time chatting with Brett, and I really encourage you to follow a number of the links that we've popped down below so you can see more about the work that Brett does and see some of the films that have been made at Limestone Permaculture. Enjoy. Thanks so much for joining me today on this show, Brett. Just for the listeners, Brett and his wife Nicole, or Nick. Do you call her Nick or Nicole?
Nikki, yeah.
Nikki, yeah. So they run a place called Limestone Permaculture, and Limestone Permaculture is a 1-acre permaculture farm about an hour north of Newcastle on the east coast of Australia. And I was so excited about talking to Brett today because It's a remarkable story. Like on this show, we talk about, sense making in a changing world. And what Brett and Nikki have done is really make sense of, what's going on in their life, what's going in the bigger picture of what's happening on the planet, and transformed basically a 1 acre paddock into this thriving permaculture farm that's their full-time work, their family life. And you may have seen some of the Happen films about their place, and I'll put the links down below in the show notes, and I highly encourage you to have a look at them to kind of get a visual image of what we're talking about. But thanks for joining me, Brett. I wanted to start out by asking you, how did you find permaculture, or how did permaculture find you in the first instance? Like, where did it begin for you?
Well, first of all, thanks, Morag, for having me on. Fantastic. And look, permaculture kicks in for many of us. After talking to many of our visitors and students, we all seem to have very similar stories. For us, it was to do with just realizing, just having those little moments that we weren't eating as well as we should have been, and then finding out my wife had ailments that were immune issues, and there was some deficiencies there and whatnot. So these things, it crept up on us. It wasn't something that just went, oh bang, here's permaculture. It basically started with just trying to grow, just wanting to consume better quality food. That's where it sort of kicked off. So I mean, that would have been getting close to 20 years ago now. That was back in the day when we had a little place in Mayfield in Newcastle, 330 square meters, which we end up turning into a little permaculture property called the Urban Squeeze. And, we started off just basically doing a little bit of gardening, finding out about our local community gardens. And then one thing led to another. Before I knew it, I was a coordinator of the community gardens, and all of a sudden I'm researching, I'm doing courses, I'm doing workshops, and this, it was years later when I went, oh wow, I've done that. But it was something that crept up on us. But initially, it was more to do with our health, and then everything else evolved around that. Yeah.
Yeah, that's really interesting, isn't it? And I find it interesting too. You saying how it crept up on you. You just find yourself immersed in it over time, and health is one of the major reasons why so many people get into it. And like you're saying, you go into the store, and if you have a health issue, what is the food that you actually really want to eat from there? Like, what is the stuff that's going to nourish you? And we all know that the best stuff comes out of the most beautiful, most healthy soil, and as freshly picked as possible, and infused with love of growing it, and all of that. So that's fantastic. Um, I also, you mentioned too, I think in the film you were talking about how permaculture has changed you. Like, how do you think it's changed
Yeah.
you, or maybe and your family as
Well,
well?
this leads off your first question, really. So, if you think about that, when I found permaculture, I found it coming in from a health impact. Um, we know permaculture is much, much more than all that, but that's where it kicked off for us. And so for us, when we say it changed us, it brought about a new thinking. So it brought a new line of thinking of actually more awareness. And I know it's something that's thrown around a little bit, but it needs to be. So the idea of awareness of what's going on culturally, what's going on socially, what's going on, through our land, through the demographics of people, the whole package. It was one of those things that we were a little bit eyes shut. Well, we were probably mostly eyes shut. And the initial thing was health. It flagged it for us. It opened our eyes, and then it brought us into that situation where we got to pick up these books and read them. We got to check websites out, and before we know it, we're delving much farther and much deeper than health. So permaculture changed us at every level, and then it got to a stage where we spent the best part of probably 9, near close to 10 years in Newcastle, building up an urban scenario. So it started with health, and we ended up getting to the stage where we were actually having open days and we were doing that kind of thing. So then we had this realization that we felt that we wanted to be educators. We thought that we could have much more to offer if we could show demonstration. And demonstration was one thing good in the urban area. That was great. And there was a lot going on where we were. And then we thought, right, well, let's move towards a semi-rural, peri-urban, that in-between zone, which we're at, where we could sort of show farmers what potentially was for their farm and homestead, and urban and suburban, what the potential was for their yards, backyards, and urban homesteads. So this was a really directed move. Like, we really got there and sat down and we started thinking and planning. And yes, permaculture was all part of that idealism of actually taking your time, not just observing like everybody talks about out in the open, but observing within. So getting there and going, right, what do we want? What's our vision? What's our context? What's our holistic context, right? So we got there and we really put some emphasis in our family, sitting down at the dinner table and going, where are we? What are we doing? Where do we want to be? And so we started planning, and it even meant that we changed our jobs. So I was a builder, and I knew that I couldn't. I knew that with what I was doing, being a builder and doing administration at night and working, 11, 12, 13, 14 hours a day, it was going to be hard to try and fit something else in. So the problem was the solution. I had to find a job that brought it back to a 9 to 5 job, or something where I wasn't caught up with my own admin. So I changed from being a builder of my own business. It was only a tiny little business, but I moved into a job, and I took risks. I took gambles, like everybody. I was basically fluffing my way through, and just just trying to find a job that had nothing to do with making big pay or anything like this. It was something that gave me time to think, time to plan, time to put more time with my family about where we're going to be in the future. And that was a real thing to us. So when you say permaculture changes, it hasn't stopped changing it. We haven't. This is just, and you would be in the same boat, and everybody who has taken on permaculture in their life would be in that same situation. It just continually evolves, continually changes, and it's what you get excited about. It's what you wake up in the morning for. It's brilliant.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's and you kind of open up to one of the other questions that I wanted to ask you about the transition, because I know that, as you're saying, you were running your own business and fully immersed in that. And then, that's really interesting what you're saying about taking on a job, knowing that that was a transitionary stage. Like, that wasn't that was the thing you're going to do forever. That was a step towards creating something else. That this whole idea of transition from being fully immersed in a business or a job to being on a farm, and that being your full-time work. You know, I do a lot of work with young students. I've actually got a group coming up on the weekend, actually Thursday, Friday, a group coming up, high school kids, who are doing a permaculture camp here. And I quite often ask them things like, oh, so who's interested in being a farmer or a grower? It's like, everyone's sitting on their hands. Like, no, although I have to say it's changing a little bit. There's more people starting to go, actually, it's starting to look kind of really interesting. But I wonder, for you, that process of transition, like, what are some of the I don't know, the tips or the hacks or the advice
Mm.
of making that transition? Like, a lot of people dream about what you're doing, having a nice property in the country, making a living off a farm, and you're doing it on 1 acre. Like,
Yeah.
how do you do that?
Look, again, we actually talk about this in our courses, and we talk about it on our, even on our open days and farm tours. It all stems back to, first of all, taking the time to have some kind of vision, some kind of core intention. And so first of all, you've got to acknowledge that you're looking for something more in your life. You're aiming for something more. And there's a lot of us. Oh, look, I think nearly everybody does, right? So that's the initial part, and then going with using permaculture principles to actually guide you. So take those principles, and they can be used in all different ways. But take those principles and then use them in the planning process of your future, of your vision, right? So for us, when we were sitting around the table back in 2007 and saying, "Hey, we want to move out of the city and live in the country," we had a lot. We've got a mortgage back in there. The actual mortgage was higher back then. Living in the cities is more expensive. So we had a mortgage there, and we were trying to work out how can we do all this, and actually pull our kids out of school, and there was so much to this. And so we sat down and we just put pen to paper, and we just planned out. We had righto. What have we got? What have we got right now? And when I say what have we got, I meant not just in the physical terms, but what have we got, socially, we had a good neighborhood, what have we got right now? Then what do we want? And then what do we need? And then what's our wishes, right? So what do we need? Well, we'd like a bit more space. We'd love to take our neighbors with us, but that couldn't happen. But we wanted a bit more space. We wanted to be able to do more, and we wanted to be able to give more back. And then the wish list was, well, can we afford? Could we somehow get a loan and get that? What the wish is like being able to do it, but have that ability to do that. So the transition for us was taking those steps early and just simply putting pen to paper. And one of the things people can do right now, and this is what we talk about all the time, is you're not going to achieve anything in the future, like 5 years down the track, if you don't start thinking about it and planning for it now. You've got to do it. And that should be exciting to them. It shouldn't be overwhelming. It shouldn't be scary. It should be absolutely exciting. You should be, it's like thinking about going on a holiday, but this is a lifelong holiday, right?
Yes.
So ideally, for us, it was that thought, well, I need to change my job. My wife needed to change her job. Now, sometimes you can get lucky. Sometimes you have the privilege of being able to change jobs quite easily. You may have certain academics, or there may be some scenario, and then other times you've really got to give it a big go, and sometimes you've got to take a risk. Well, we took some risks. We took some pretty serious risks, and we. I wouldn't say that we were lucky. We forced them. We made them happen. So even when I moved to my next job, it was a job that I'd never done before. I'd never worked in any form of coordinating or measurements, and I basically, what would you say? I made it look better than it was to get in there. But then I grew into the job, and I used the job as a stepping stone. So again, when you're thinking about your planning, everything is a stepping stone to where you want to be. Right. So I used the job as a stepping stone. And then the more I read, the more I started to understand the principles, and I utilized them into everything I was doing. So I got to the stage where I was getting more confident. And whilst I still didn't know all the things I needed to know, maybe to be on the land and all this kind of thing, it was all in sequence, and it was all transitionary to get to that point. So then by 2007, we've got up to 2010. And all of a sudden, we've got at 2009, we've got our house on the market. We still don't own it. It's a mortgaged house, right? But we've managed to get enough from the house to pay that back, and left us with just enough to get the deposit to get the next place and have a mortgage for that. But the good news was that moving a little bit further out of the city just gave us that chance. It was a little bit cheaper. So it actually, one of the thoughts patterns for us was, how could we get out of debt? That's the other thing. How do you reduce your debt? And we made some stupid mistakes when we were younger. We paid for them early, but we've working our way back out of that now. So everything was about all these little steps and all these things that can only be acknowledged if you actually put them out in front of yourself, in front of your partner, in front of your family, your friends, whatever it is, whoever you're trying to work in with. And that transition thing worked its way all the way up to the end of 2017 when we've been here. So 2010 to 2017, and that job did its job. I stayed with that job right through to that 2017. So it was nearly 10 years at that job. And it did exactly what I planned and hoped it did. I mean, we can talk about with all honesty. And the reality was that at the end of 2017, I walked up to my boss and I shook his hand. And I said, thank you very much. This has been an absolute pleasure. Bye-bye. And we made the transition over into our farm. But during that time, from the moment we moved onto the farm to that point of 2017, we actually had built the planning and design of the property. And whilst that was happening, so we were only getting afternoons and weekends to make this happen because we were doing 50-hour weeks, both of us, with young kids. So we're doing 50-hour weeks, and essentially what we did was, at the same time, by about 2012, we started bringing in the business model. And, again, we self-taught ourselves. We didn't know how to run a website. We had no idea what Facebook was. All these things are self-done. We built our own website. We worked everything out ourselves. We researched, we studied. And when people ask, what does this all mean to get to that transition? What does it all mean to transition? It means research, assessing, analyzing, observation. You need to put your effort into this to get a good outcome. You've got to put time. These things aren't going to come to you on a spoon, So I mean, there's a lot more to it, but that's these are the things that we had to go through. Yeah.
No, I think you've really explained that well. A permaculture life and what the kind of life that you've created comes from that really clear intent and a lot of hard work, and that idea that there needs to be steps along the way. It's not like just jumping in right now and this is exactly how it is. That you kind of see that bigger picture and you map it out together, and you do the groundwork. You do a design on your life. And I was wondering about how in all of that too, just before that, I was just thinking it's almost like you've tuned your brain into a certain pattern to be receptive to learning different things, seeing certain opportunities, and that everything is kind of tuned in. It's like your perception of the world shifts from having these particular goals to having these. And so everything that you're doing in your life is then sort of aimed towards that direction. What I was going to ask you though was about your kids. So did you say you got 2 kids?
Yeah, well, one's not a kid anymore, I should say. So one's 25 and 6 foot high.
Oh, but like they must have started in this process young. So how did they feel about this process of moving out of the city to the country and all of that? What were their needs that they asked for in the process of all of this?
Yeah, honestly, Morag, we could definitely do this for about 3 days. Look, the impacts are profound, right? So if you can imagine, my kids are 10 years apart. So my boy was 14 years old and my daughter was 3.5 when we moved up. And so my son was in a school in Newcastle that had 1,500 kids, right? And sometimes kids can get a little bit lost in that, right? When he moved up here, he moved up to Gloucester High. He went to Gloucester High, and then that was 200 kids.
Oh, wow.
And when he walked into when he walked into his first day in his classroom, they all stood up and went and shook his hand. Right?
Wow, I just got shivers down my spine.
Yeah. I mean, it still brings a tear to my eye just about. It was amazing, absolutely amazing. So my daughter didn't know the difference too much, right? We had a beautiful little courtyard that had pumpkins growing overhead and waves of all kinds of stuff, pawpaws and everything. So she knew no different. She just went from green to green. But my boy definitely took it in. So it was interesting because we got to see what nearly a 4-year-old to a 14-year-old, and pulling a young person out of school, it's a big impact. He had friends, and there was some big talks and decisions we had to make. But we brought him up just when we were getting close to wanting to purchase the little 1 acre. And he walked out onto the grass, and I said, "Can you imagine riding your bike around here? Can you imagine?" I got him trying to envision himself playing there. And he turned around to me after being there for about half an hour, 3/4 an hour, and he goes, and he was 14, so he could talk like a 14-year-old. He said, "I can do this, Dad."
Wow.
And I went, "Awesome."
Wow.
So it made it much easier. I imagine that if they were, you could be more locked in the cities, but he left here. He was in a soccer team, and there's things he left.
Mm-hmm.
But he moved on, and he's moved on in a big way. He ended up he ended up going to year 12 in Gloucester and showing cattle and winning awards, and you know, and now he's an apprentice landscaper, and and all that kind of. So this it's things move and change in funny directions, and we're also big believers in the universe too. So it's
Mm.
it's amazing if you can keep moving forward, if you can keep feeling positive and just keep doing the little things. It's amazing how sometimes the big things can follow.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Totally. I totally agree. Now, I wonder whether you could kind of, it's so much easier to show, but I wonder whether you could describe what it is that happens on your farm. I mean, there's something I heard on your film, and you can correct me if I misheard this, but so it's 1 acre, and you can feed up to like 100 people off this piece of land.
Yeah. Look, I got a little bit carried away back in the day. In 2015, when we had Happen Films come in for the first one, our farm was only like, part way there. And I got a little bit excited. And during my excitement while being filmed, I said that we fed 50 families, right? What was meant to be said at the time. And Happen Films rectified it, but it was too late. Right. So it was my fault. I got there and I said, we feed 50 families. What I was meant to say is what we assisted in feeding 50. So
Yeah.
we were getting 50 families worth of people buying from our farm gate and bartering and all this kind of thing. But yeah, we weren't feeding 50 people each
Yeah.
one. So,
Well,
yeah.
regardless, that's an impressive thing. Like you're talking, you've got 1 acre. The whole 1 acre
Mm,
is fully productive, and you have animal systems, you have food forest systems, you've got zone 1 systems. Maybe just like walk us through some of the things that you've got there, and some of the really like particularly, I'm really interested to hear how you described your farm. It's like an ecosystem. It's like nature's come alive in your farm.
yeah.
Going from a paddock to what you've got.
Yeah.
Maybe just, yeah, tell me what are some of your favorite parts of this farm of yours.
So I'll try and bring this down to the short side.
We could talk for
Yeah,
days
look,
about this too, I'm sure.
anybody that visits us knows that I can talk. So yeah. So look, essentially, first off the bat, on average, we've got 130 animals and 500 fruit and nut trees. It's not about how much. That sounds a little bit overwhelming to people, and they go, "Oh my god, 130 animals, 500 fruit and nut trees." It's not about that. That's just the way it's evolved. Like it's got to that stage. We never said, "Hey, we want 500 fruit and nut trees." That's just where it's evolved to. So we would have been happy with 100, So what we found out was the more we delved into the stacked functions and really get nitty gritty with intensive systems that were regenerative and beneficial to each other, the more we found that we could just keep fitting more in there, and then they were just working towards each other. So it's been mind bending for us. I mean, we still wake up in the morning and grab a cuppa and sit out on the back and just look at that and just go, wow. And we get excited when the first type of fruit of a particular tree comes on, and my wife is flat out always fermenting and preserving and all this kind of thing. But the reality is the farm itself has become so complex. It is so full of complexity, right? So I suppose, for those listening, when you think about us humans, and you'll hear this in holistic management, that, us humans are really good with complicated stuff. We're good with working with linear and mechanical, and we're fabulous, right? Complexity in the bio, on the ecological side of things, is where we sort of come a little bit undone, generally speaking, right? If you can combine the both, if you can bring some of that complicated thinking into that complexity, you can start to interweave some of these systems that are just, for me, that's the way I have to think. So I'm a carpenter, right? I'm a tradesman. I am not a horticulturalist or a botanist or anything like that. But I've just brought what I've learned in the past in to support what I'm learning now, to help me get to the stage where the farm has got systems in place now that are doing so many functions. To give some examples, we've got systems in place in the front. When we first got to the farm, we had one of our worst winds within the first 4 months. It was nearly 110 kilometre gusts and on average 90k winds. Now it picked up our first glass house and threw it down the valley.
Oh
Right?
no.
Yeah. So like we were learning hard and fast. Now I placed it in the right position. Right, it was on the downhill side of the west, and we looked at all that. We're all based on site sector analysis and the rest, but the planning still hadn't, like, I'd only done part of the planning. So the reality is that the system now is set up that we've now managed to get the wind going over the top of our property. The whole property now has got a filtering effect down low and a buffering effect up high. Everything is multifunctional as you would expect in permaculture. So we've got our vertical tree crops, we have our chop and drop, we have our fodder, we have our our actual edibility for us. So there's stuff that we can pick from it, and we've been really precise and really definite in the way we think about what's going into the place. We're also part of the Karura Land Care, so we're always thinking about weed species. Again, our idea of weed species, we won't go down that avenue, but we understand what the difference is there. But yeah, so essentially a lot of thinking went into play, and it's evolved as it's gone. So we had a design that got us to the stage where we could provide protection and stability. And if anybody was to ask me what was one of the key things you want on your property, and the first thing that comes to people's minds is, I need a kitchen garden, I need to eat. And I go, yeah, that's great, but what are you going to do to protect it? Right. So now what I can talk to people about, when I say you need to bring stability into an environment, whatever environment that is, even if it's a grass paddock, you need to bring stability into that environment to then be able to evolve from that, use that edge effect, build from that. And once you've got stability, there's not much you can't do.
Mm.
You can do all different types of microclimates. You can grow on either side. You can do whatever you want to do. But the reality is that the systems we now got has got it in place that it's so what's the word I'm looking for? It's grayed over in such a way that there's no defining line between going from the animal managed systems into the food forest, into the orchard systems, back up into the little market garden northern area, market garden southern area. Even into our social areas and into our water towers where we can test our meads and our beers, and everything flows through. And I think that's where you start to get to a stage where you sit back and you see the resilience of your property, and it all stems back, for me, it all stems back from building protective systems in place, bringing stability in, and then proliferating, just coming back out of that. I don't know if I'm conveying that as well as I
Oh
should.
no, absolutely, it's making complete sense. I had the same experience on my place, that I was this frost pocket and wind tunnel and all these things that I could do nothing. I had kangaroos that would come in and like beat up all the plants until I got the protective systems in place. Anything that I did would just fall over, and it was that, if I'd had that same, I would give myself the same advice if I was starting from scratch. So I think it's such an important part. It's like you say, that often the first thing people want to do is go out and buy the seedlings. Right, I'm ready to get a garden going. We've got to start, way back before then. And I think that's one of the brilliant things about permaculture, is it does help us to stop and to think and to plan. And even when we do plan, we know that there's always something else we learn. And that was something else I think that you said in the film too, which I picked up and I thought, yes, absolutely, that there is no final design.
No.
And so do you want to just talk us about that? Because I think that was a really key point that you mentioned, and I really loved that.
Well, that was an evolution as well. So when I did my training years back through the PRI, there was, there was mention that they used to call it final design. There was that mention so some teachers were mentioning final design, and that's fine. But what we realised was there couldn't be. So the more that we networked, the more that we got to meet more people in permaculture, everybody's saying the same thing. And they're going, how could you get to that? How could you even let anybody know that there is such a thing? You're working with nature. It's ever changing, ever evolving. How can you have a final design? It's not like a house plan. So, for us, that was the light bulb moment for us was I started doing designs back in 2015 for some people, where I was initially doing consulting, but I started doing a couple of designs for people. Now, I still think design work is important, and I still think some people do require that assistance, and absolutely no dramas for all those permaculture people out there doing that. But what we found personally was that I felt there was a couple of things. First of all, I felt like I was giving them a fish rather than teaching them how to fish. And secondly, I felt like I was giving them something that would change the minute they did one of the projects on it. And then how would they adjust to that? So, I pulled back. I pulled back. And the light bulb moment was when I actually had some elderly people I'd done a design for come back to me and go, "Hi, Brett, we've done these things you said. It's all worked out, but now this is all different and we can't use it." And I've gone, "Oh my God, damn, I've got to, this is not right." So, we moved into we took a step back and we said, right, it can only ever be a concept, right? It can only ever be a concept design that has the ability to move in so many different directions, and then you as either the designer or the consultant or the client or student or whatever you may be have the ability to move with that.
Mm-hmm.
So at the moment, when as an example, if you plant a tree, if you do a design and you say, right, I'm going to put in some kind of climax or canopy tree in a certain spot, and then you come back a year later and it's 3 meters high, and 2 years later it's 6 meters high. What was there initially has changed profoundly to the extent that it was relying on everything else around it. Now it is the environmental changer. Now everything's relying on it. If it's making too much shade, it might kill something. If it's not placed properly, So the situation with that was we then realised that okay, when we start doing our PDCs, and that's how we evolved, was that we started to bring that thinking in right through the whole part of the course. That never mind, you are not building a house. You're not doing a structural drawing, right? It has to be fluid. It has to be organic. Just roll with it. And when people come up and go, "Yeah, I'm not sure about this," we'll go, "Do the best bit of research and give it the best possible understanding you can, right? And then trial it, and then watch it, right? And if it needs modification, modify it. But don't let it overwhelm you. Don't let it scare you, and don't let it hold you back."
I think you're right. I love the way, it's not a building. Building is using materials that are dead and fixed. And when you put them up and you hammer them in, they're going to stay there. Whereas when you plant a tree, the tree grows and things change. It's a living system, and it's not just a living thing. It's a living system, and the system is dynamic, and it's constantly in flow and flux and change. And you are part of that system. You're embedded in that. And the more you're out there and noticing it, the more you can just kind of, notice where you need to tweak things. And I think, yeah, I think I had a similar, I actually went through landscape architecture school back in my, uni days, way back when. And I got to the end of that and I was sort of scratching my head thinking too, like, this doesn't really make any sense. Like, you're designing these things for people and handing it over to maybe like someone who's going to put it in, and then they just become the consumer of this constructed space. Didn't make any sense to me whatsoever. And I was more interested too in designing edible landscapes and natural landscapes. And I realized too, right, that in order for this to work, people needed to know how to interact with it, how to do it themselves. And so I think this idea of being a design consultant as an educator. So you're helping people to design, you're doing
That's
design
exactly right.
and educating simultaneously. And even if you are a consultant, that it is kind of almost like a coaching process of how you see. It's not just designing, constructing, okay, here's your permaculture design. It's actually working with people to help them to also see it and then be able to interact over time and become part of a learning community where you've got people you can be learning with and trading with and coming over and going, "Oh, you know what, try this over here or try this over here." And like you're saying, you bring people to your place and they see something and then they go back, "Oh, I know what I can do at my place." And this learning. It's this lifelong learning, and I think that's what you said early on. It's what makes it so exciting that it's there's always something new to learn, and
You never
everything's
want it to
always
stop.
changing, and it's never the same every day. And there's always something new, like a new bird might land in your garden. I was just been listening the last couple of nights to the barking owls and out there
Yeah.
watching which trees are they landing in and going out with my head torch trying to
Yeah,
spot
yeah,
them. And
looking for
it's just like, wow, did you hear that, Monty? To my 8-year-old, and we're out there
yeah.
out, sort of like, where's the barking owl? It sounds like a dog.
Yeah. Well, look, honestly, what you said about the coaching side of things, it's the only way it can work truly. It has to be a consultancy, and in that, sorry, it has to be part of a consultancy. So for me, and I'm seeing it everywhere now. Like, it's so good. All the educators out there are really taking hold of this. That you're not going there and you're not telling somebody how to do it, right? You're actually educating them and showing them the benefits of doing it, right? So for me, it is coaching, it is education all the time, and we let them know. So when we offer somebody our services, we tell them we're coming here to really do on-site education, right? And out of that, you will, depending on the circumstance, you may get a bubble concept style situation or an overlay concept situation that more talks about the connections, the integrations, the mutual benefits, the synergies, right? Rather than saying that's going to go there and you need to plant those 5 trees with it. Yeah, you got it. It's about the connection and that and a mutual connection at that. But once they get that, then they start to understand. So giving them a design that is more like a blueprint is helping no one.
It's just
Really, it's not.
it's at one point in time, really, isn't it? And
It's a
it's
it's a
just an
snapshot in
idea.
time. It's
Yeah,
a
yeah, that's
snapshot in
right.
time, yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
And I really like that way too, that, it essentially permaculture then is, I mean, there's different dimensions of it, but essentially, like, it is a system of education and changing perceptions on
yeah,
how we think, so that then how we can design, how we can share that with other people, that everything we do is a form of education once we're in permanent, whether it's like you've got your demonstration farm, or whether it's the way that you raise your family within it, that it's this immersive learning.
yeah,
It is about, I've just been doing some studies with Fritjof Capra, the system scientist, and basically, right at the very core of life at a cellular level, is saying that what describes life is that it's a learning system, right from a cellular level, right from there. And so that this whole idea that we learn, and we learn in communities, we learn in context with each other, we learn in context with place. It's not like this abstracted thing.
mm.
It's got to be like this totally connected kind of system. So
It's one of the
I
good
really,
things about being human. Beneficial pass down of knowledge, or sorry, pass down of beneficial knowledge.
yeah,
That's one of the things that does make us great. Like, the problem is we've lost some of that. The idea
yeah,
of something learnt because of either an error or a good judgment passed down, and then it's sort of slowed up
mm,
in some ways. And that's why we need to regenerate that. We need to reinvigorate that,
mhm.
and I think permaculture really highlights that. Absolutely.
And just looking at the plan behind you, what you've done is really quite remarkable. And I think that there's something very important in what you're doing. You've created this. It's a learning center. It's your family's place where you live. It's where you get your food. It's a demonstration to people, and it's a demonstration about how you can live regeneratively. You can live a kind of a one planet life on 1 acre. Like, you haven't got a 50-acre farm, you haven't got a 100-acre farm, you have 1 acre. And how much productivity that you can get out of how many fruit trees and animals and plants and food and harvest, and how many people are coming and getting their local, fresh food from you at the farm gate. 1 acre. Now, I keep saying that over and over because it's remarkable. And if we all start to think about, well, how much could we all be doing on our 1 acre or quarter acre if we're, in the suburbs, or less,
Yeah, for sure.
that if every single piece of land that we're stewarding, we think about how we can make it a place for people, a place for food, a place for nature, a place for learning, a place for, you know, connecting with nature and just having really good sense of health and well-being. What an amazing world it would be. And if we could actually compress so much of our footprint on the planet
Mm.
so that we could allow nature to regenerate, like there's so much of our food just, so much of our planet is taken up by creating food for animals or food for people or food for the industrial system in one way or another. If we could bring back our footprint as much as we possibly could, I think this is such a brilliant example. Um,
Yeah.
yeah,
We're really proud of it. Proud in the sense that we've been able to um, see some of our vision come to the forefront. This is something we've been working on for so long. To think that, we were sitting back all those years ago at a table and scribbling around and not even knowing what we were going to get, but always thinking about we wanted to stay small. So just to give you a little bit of insight, when we were moving up, it was cheaper to buy 5 or 10 acres than it was to buy 1 acre. When back in 2010, when we came up here, 1 acre was hard to come by,
mm,
right? For some reason, the little 1 acres were taken up. So we got really lucky. We did. We got lucky with that, but it wanted us. There's no doubt it wanted us because it stayed on the market and it wanted us. And when we got here, it was one of those things where we took in that site sector analysis style of thinking, right? So the analysis thinking, where we looked at this place and went, right, imagine a farm gate there. Geez, this road's quite busy. Okay, it's got a Norris aspect, and we're looking at all these things. We go, look at the potentials, and that's what life should be about. What's the potentials?
mm,
What's the potential in you? What's the potential of, look at my family? Look what we can look what we can do, and it doesn't matter how big or how small. And we talk about all the time about things being scalable, right? So the good thing where we come from was we come from 330 square meter property with a house on it, which means that there was a little courtyard and a 2 meter strip out the front of the house and a little tiny strip down the side of the house. So we know what it's like to come from tight,
mhm.
real tight, right? The next stage after us is a unit on a veranda, right? That's the next stage. Because there was no grass, there was no lawn or anything. It was just tiny. So we really gave that a good shot, and we've got all our old photos, and at the time, we had people coming through, so we know where that is. So when we're talking to people, and anybody listening out to the podcast now, the main thing you got to remember is that there is always potential. There is always change that can be made that's going to bring back something more in your life. And it doesn't have to be always food. It can be beauty. It could be fragrant smells just blowing through the glass of your. I've done little assistance with concepts and stuff where we've set up like a perfumery style, sensory style garden just on a veranda, just so they had nice smells coming through.
Yeah.
And something look was, so permaculture is so broad in its thinking, it's so broad in its in its potential, right? That you can, apart from working at community levels, regional levels, country levels, and world levels, you can bring it all the way back down into a tiny little apartment veranda, and you can make that something so special that you want to sit out there and have your coffee every morning and truly enjoy it. And people need to know that's there. That's totally possible.
Yeah.
You've
Yeah.
just got to have a go. You just got to
So
get into it.
there's a couple of questions that I really need to ask you because I know listeners will be wanting. Like, how do you make a living on 1 acre? Like, what are the multiple dimensions? I know that it's not just one thing. Obviously, it's not one thing, and I
Yeah.
know that myself. I'm here on 1 acre as well in the eco
Yep.
village, and there's many different things that make up a livelihood. What are the things that support you?
Yeah. So for us, it again, you're talking about something that's been a transition. So one of the great photos that we show in our PDC course when we're first kicking off was in 2011, when we were just basically bare bones on the ground. We had a little fold down box out the front with a little tin saying your honesty is appreciated, and we had veggies out the front. So it started off like the old wheelbarrow style idea of a little veggie thing, and it brought in a couple of dollars, and it helped us move on to buy more seeds and all the rest of it. But it was a transition. So it started there, right? Then from that point where we got to the stage where we built this up, I would say first and foremost, it came from upskilling. It came from building your knowledge base. So when I was working these jobs, I was doing night school. So I would, I did a diploma in project management because I wanted to know that if I got to the stage of doing permaculture projects, how could I help manage that, right? So, and then, apart from PDCs and other things, and eventually did the Cert 4 in permaculture, and eventually did the advanced design with David Holgram and Dan Palmer, so it's always been learning, and number one rule is you never stop. Now, that may mean something as simple as watching a video, listening to a podcast, reading a book, right? You can go any level learning as long as you're taking something and knowing more than you did a minute ago, right, or the day before. So the idea of income for us is now we've got to a stage where we've got 11 income streams. And I was taught by a lovely old fella years ago who used to say to me, a South African fella, used to say to me, he goes, Brett, he goes, all the income streams, he says, it doesn't matter if that makes $1 there and $1 there. He says, as long as it's ethical, and he says, as long as that dollar's still coming, he says, that's just as important as making $100 or $1,000. So we treat each of our income streams, no matter how tiny, as important, right? So you give respect to your income streams, and basically your income streams should always be permaculture based. They should always have the ethics and the principles. So the ethics providing the moral, and the principles providing the roadmap. Right. So that's where that works into your business life, right? So yeah, we live in a world where we still have we still need to pay a mortgage. Sadly that's life. We do a hell of a lot of bartering. That's part of our income stream. So we do a stack of bartering. We have a huge network, and it's amazing. It is, in fact, I can't wait to get to the stage where I never have to even think about moving $1 ever again.
I think that's an amazing thing you're saying that, and you're counting that as, I like that you're counting that as an income stream, because it is, definitely. We often dismiss that the gift economy and the sharing economy is like separate. It is actually a core part of actually creating abundance and feeling like we have enough and making sure that everyone has enough. That is a key part, isn't it?
I can't even put a value to it, Morag.
No,
I mean, honestly,
that's true.
It is so huge. I mean, we get, we barter for aged venison. We barter for fish and prawns and oysters.
So you get the quality that you couldn't have, you probably wouldn't be able to afford necessarily.
No. Oh, no. No, and not just that, some of the things you can't even buy.
I know that is true too.
Right? Some things you just can't get in a shop.
No.
But remember, it's that old adage of one person's treasure, another person's, well, I won't say junk, but it's that they've got a surplus, they've got an excess, and so what we're finding is as our network grows, and we're very hands-on and face-to-face type people, right? So as this grows, we're getting there, and the interactions are just humbling. That's the best word I can tell. It's absolutely humbling. Sometimes I'm going, whoa, and they're giving me fish, and I'm going, I've only got all this, I've only got veg and honey and whatever for you, and they're going, no, that's enough, and they're arguing with me. I'm going, but no, you need more,
I also love that about bartering is that you're not actually trying to push the price down. You're always trying to give more.
Put a price, yeah. So you just shoveling stuff off to them, and they're going whoa, but you're looking what you're about to get, and you're going, oh my god, oh no, this isn't enough, So
but isn't that interesting though? Like when you create abundance within a system, that you have this sense that it's not a lack, I have more than I can give. I have more than enough food out in this garden. I can give more without it even really making much of a difference to what's going on
Oh,
there, you know?
you get to the stage where, I mean, look, honestly, and this, without sounding flippant or anything like, we've got to the stage we have got so much food on this property, so
Mhm.
much that we hand food over many times to, we've taken at different times, we've taken bags of foods and a bag of food to cafes or whatever, and even we've even bartered for our dinner. We've even
Nice.
done barters for our dinner. Yeah, like, oh, well, look, we've got a beautiful community.
Yeah.
And then, it's a dynamic that you haven't got total control of, and that's what I love about it.
Mhm.
I love the fact that you could be talking to somebody and they go, "Oh, I've got something in the car," and they'll go, "All right," and you go, "Oh yeah, wow," and I've got this, and so it can happen at the flash, and it's so different to money. It's so
Yeah,
different to
yeah.
that idea of paying for something, and there's the price. This is something it's fluid. It's just, I love it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's absolutely beautiful. That's amazing.
yeah.
And one of the other
That's a good
questions I was gonna
question.
ask you, but in a way that you've almost answered this, because I was gonna ask you how you went during COVID, because, you've got your food system, you've got your community network. There was a sense in many urban areas that there was a fear of the food system breaking and there not being enough and panic
Yeah,
buying. How did you feel in the midst of all of that time, and how did what happened? Did more people start coming out to you saying, "Help
yeah.
us to do this"? Like, what was it like for you?
Well, as we all know, COVID was a special period for good and bad reasons. I'd like to think that for every time we have something that is, an event that puts pressure on the system or puts pressure on us as human beings, also can have an uplifting. It can be something that brings change. So for us, what we saw was a huge influx, massive. Basically, people couldn't move out. So, and there was so much that we got to watch. We got to watch yourself. The Zoom stuff that was going on. There was so much movement happening without actual bodies moving around on the ground, and that was fantastic. But the other part we got was people then emailing us and ringing us and texting us. I mean, at one stage we were doing 35 a night. It was nuts. I mean, and this was crazy stuff, but it was uplifting. It was overwhelming, but uplifting. And it was people asking, saying that when we get back on deck, how can we do what you're doing? And so in the meantime, we set up these little packages where we would, just an email package, we'd go, here's some good books to read, watch these websites, check these podcasts, dun. And so we got to the stage where
Fantastic.
we were just pumping that out every night, just flat
Excellent.
out.
Yeah.
So whilst we couldn't directly assist straight off the bat, we got the ball rolling,
Yeah.
and we always speak about locality. So we had people. Oh God, we were getting emails from France and Portugal and all over the shop. Oh, amazing! Like India, everywhere, and we've even got to the stage where we've managed to find some of the texts for different books in their language. So obviously we know some of them, like the designers manual, but I end up finding some other information. Plus, we end up finding some of the educators in their region. So we set up these little folders on our desktop. So somebody from Portugal come in and boom, 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 and I go, right, where you at? And I look you on a map, and I use a translator to translate back and push that in. And so we were sending this stuff off flat out. So we were doing this, and we weren't even letting people know that we were doing it. We were just doing it.
Yeah.
And we did this all the way through last year. Now we did it with our locals too. So we did it with all throughout the region and then interstate. And we were also saying to them at the time, we're going, yes, thanks for coming to us, but you're in Queensland, right? Well, you need to check out Mike Wardell, Save the Soil. You're in northern New South Wales, you need to check out Morag, blah, blah, blah. So we were pumping that out flat out as well. So this was a big part of our emails were people reaching out and going, okay, this isn't acceptable. We're not happy with this situation, and we've just realised how vulnerable we are at the moment, right? So we're wanting to make change, and I go, well, you've already made the first step.
Yeah.
Thanks
Yeah.
for coming, right? And then we started pumping information out, and then later on, as it started to settle down, and people were to start coming back into our farm tours and courses, some of these people would turn up. So, like we'd have some of these people coming here, coming to a place for, as I say, whether it be private tours or public farm tours or small courses or whatever it might be. So this has been an impactful event, and it's one part of a group of events for us. So you know yourself, living where you live, that all up and down the coast we've had the worst fires, the worst flood, the worst drought, and a COVID just to throw in on the mix, right?
Yeah.
So it's enough to start, giving us a little slap in the face and going, come on, I'm trying to tell you something here. This is nature saying, watch me. You guys need to start getting your act together.
Yeah,
And
wake
people
up.
actually started to listen to that and wake up to that. So we've had a massive influx, and it's been brilliant. And everybody I talk to, so I talk to my peers in Queensland and Victoria and Western Australia, and and everybody's saying the same thing. So yes, it was a tough event and a sad event for some people. But there's things to be taken out of it that I think are going to empower people, move people forward, and it was it's going to be interesting to see where we go from here.
And it's just wonderful what you just described that you did, and I it's what I find is interesting is that when you have that sense of resilience and security, and you're kind of settled in, you got your place set up, you've intentionally done that. So when there's a crisis like that, you are grounded enough to be able to then be the one that's in that position of doing the community service work and reaching out, and that people are seeing that's kind of like a beacon of safety or security or what is the possible future, and trying to find out more. And that's so great that that you had the time, or you made the time, into your evenings, just because, not for any other reason, but just because it matters that people have access to this information.
It absolutely does. You can't, we never knock back an email. I mean, if it comes through, we're going to respond to it.
Yeah.
And look, just touching on a point on, you know, the the importance of taking from our strengths. So using our strengths. So, okay, my strength these days is to be an educator in permaculture, and more importantly, the part that I focus on in permaculture, because obviously there's people that know a lot more about the socio side of things and the philosophical side of things. So I'm more into that demonstrative design style setup, like it, and building systems. I love it. I get super excited, right,
I can tell.
about just being amongst various living systems and making systems just function and work. Well, start them off and then they work themselves out.
Yeah.
But what I was actually getting back to was that's my strength. Now, during the fires, I had my local community, and some of their strengths were they were firefighters, and they saved my place. They saved our area, And then during the floods, we had people who had strengths in that. So everybody, you come to the fore with the things that are within you that you feel empowered and confident by. And I've seen that through all the events. So when it got to COVID, that was my time.
I think you've really hit the nail on the head with that, and that it's not about going and hiding away on your 1 acre as like doing your own thing. You are very much this part of this web of strength that a community brings, and that you are as strong in your place as your community is strong. And it's really about community resilience more than self-sufficiency. And I think what you've just said brings that so much to the fore.
Yeah, look, for me, you've just touched on a point for me too. So it's talked about much. Now, we do on our websites and stuff, we talk about self-sufficiency, and I think it's important still to have that in the game, but being aware that it's only part of what this whole big picture is about, because the reality is we as a species we cannot be alone, we cannot be disconnected, we cannot be not integrated. So we actually have got absolutely no choice but to work it out together,
Yeah.
right? And I'm not being fluffy about it. This is the absolute truth, because I've seen what happens firsthand. I have seen a farmer who went off grid and was trying to do the right thing, had a beautiful young family, was into the game for a few months, living in a remote area, tough to start with, but trying to be that real that real off grid thing. And he broke both his legs when the tractor rolled over him. And that was game over for a long period of time. But guess what happened? He was disconnected. He's a fantastic guy, but he was disconnected at the time. Wouldn't have known this, but disconnected a little bit from his community. But then when this happened, it was the community that came together to help him sort everything out. And so we were involved too. So, seed packages, plant packages, the assistants coming in, helping the wife, boom, boom, boom. Now, he could not have done that without that help. So how could you ever be sustainable on your own? How could you ever be truly self-sufficient without having that community connection? You can't.
No, you can't. You can't.
Yeah.
Well, oh gosh, thank you so much. It's been such a delight talking with you today. I wonder whether, before we end up, where can people find out more information about all the stuff that you do? Tell us what all your links are, and I'll also put them down below in the link, but maybe just tell us now as well.
So on our website, www.limestonepermaculture.com, you can find our upcoming events. You can find out more information about us. There's our local accommodation around the area and what we do within the community. You can also find on our other Facebook page, which is Simply Homesteading. Look for Simply, I think it's just Simply Homesteading. I should know that better, shouldn't I? It's my wife's Facebook page, but more importantly, it's a page that comes in under Limestone Permaculture, where everything is just given back to our community, given back to our greater Facebook community. And it's just stacks of recipes, highlighting what you can do with the produce off your farm, off your garden, even out of your bathtub. Yeah, garden bathtub, that is. So, there's a stack of information there. On our website too, we have a resources section, and we put together a manual on how we do wicking beds. We've had a collaboration with a lovely elderly couple that have been in permaculture for 28 years. And we've designed our own style of wicking beds, which are very interesting. Also you'll find plans and how to do things in the way of exclusion tunnels. Everything's in there that we believe is important to us on our farm, and it may assist you a little bit with what you want to do.
Brilliant. Absolutely fantastic. Well, like I said before, I'm going to put all these links down below. So if you want to follow up anything that Brett's talked about, and then, of course, if you live somewhere nearby, maybe you want to join up on one of the tours or courses, because it's, seeing what you've done there, actually hearing it or watching it on Happen Films. I'll put the link to the Happen Films as well, because you've got 2 of those, haven't you? And that
you just do the N one.
But seeing it or hearing it is one thing, but actually, being in it and walking it, smelling and tasting and the immersion of that's amazing. Gosh, thank you so much again, Brett, for taking the time today to talk with me. And hopefully one day I'll be able to come down and walk your garden with you as well. That would be wonderful.
My pleasure, Morag. Yeah, and you're always welcome, and I hope you can make it down sooner rather than later.
Yeah, me too. All right, well, take care. Thanks so much, Brett.
Thanks, Morag. Bye.
Bye. So that's all for today. Thanks so much for joining us. Head on over to my YouTube channel, the link's below, and then you'll be able to watch this conversation, but also make sure that you subscribe, because that way you'll be notified of all new films that come out, and also you'll get notified of all the new interviews and conversations that come out. So thanks again for joining us. Have a great week, and I'll see you next time.